Innate helps companies avoid project surprises, make better informed decisions, share knowledge, and deliver better outcomes. Innate, transforming the way the world builds.
Hello, project people, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Project Chatter podcast. We're going to crack on without Val or Martin in this episode, but we do have a fantastic guest in Mr. Jason Lancini. Jason, how are you?
Dal, I am wonderful. Thank you very much for having me this early Saturday morning.
Well, it's usually Val getting up this early in the morning. He's probably just forgotten to take his espresso or something and, having a line. But no, it's good to have you. It's good to have you, and thanks for getting up this hour of the morning, giving up your Saturday to share some insight with me at least, and hopefully plenty of listeners out there. But hey, look, before we get into the topic, because it's a very provocative topic that you've chosen, and we'll get into it. We already got some feedback, I guess, on social media, posting the up and coming, the up next. But before we get into it, can you just take us through how you got into projects, sort of what's your background, and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, good question. I think if I go back far enough, I guess construction and project management has been something that I've been involved in since almost as far back as I can remember. I remember when I was a young child, I would be on construction sites with my father, different building sites growing up, and then almost every school holidays being shipped off to a project somewhere, whether it be for a cousin or an uncle or something to keep me busy during Christmas and school holidays, working as a laborer or a tradesman's assistant or something. And then during university, when I was studying civil engineering, I guess through the 2-3 final years of the course, I probably worked 3 days a week as a site engineer during university, and then where else to go but into construction. And so after I graduated, I probably did 5-6 years working on different infrastructure projects for John Holland in Australia here. And then I guess like all other Australian engineers, you have to at some point do the pilgrimage to London. And so moved over to London, worked on Crossrail for a couple of years, at the same time studied a master's. And then it was about the end of that period that I met a couple of the team where I work at the moment, and we started thinking about whether we could start building tools to solve some of the problems that we were dealing with on all these previous projects.
Oh, fantastic. Sorry, I just paused there briefly because I was coughing in the background and I had to go on mute. So sorry for that, ladies and gentlemen. But no, that's fantastic because that's varied, that's global. So you on site, as you say. It sounds like you got pretty frustrated, which led you to where you are with the fine folk today. How did you make that transition though into this software space? Was it easy to go from, being on construction site into software land?
No, it's certainly not easy. Like, there's all the statistics about software and startup attrition rates. But I guess for me, it was the timing was right. I'd spent, a good 10, almost 15 years in construction. So I think I had a pretty good domain expertise. I was fortunate enough to meet a group of people that had the set of skills that I clearly don't have, like technical skills, and I think a group of people that were just persistent as well, because it takes time, and making the transition. It's just for us, it was we had to just go all in, Dale, and say we're gonna give it our absolute best shot, and every day as you try to start a business, there's an up and there's a down, and you feel like you take one step forward, 2 steps back, and then at the end of the week you get like 5 steps forward. So you've just got to have a group of people around you that all lift each other up and pull each other through it.
No, absolutely. One of our previous guests was saying how you need to find your crew or find your tribe. I think it was Magnus Olsen. So it sounds like you certainly found your tribe there. But look, let's get into it. The topic, why construction software sucks. I mean, anyone reads that and they're like, why does it suck? Like I say, you've got 1 or 2 comments already on the topic, but why does it suck? Let's start there.
So what you're saying is justify your headline, Jason.
Absolutely.
I guess I need to qualify it. It doesn't suck. It doesn't all suck. But when you talk to projects every day about the tools that they have to use to deliver their projects, it's amazing how many people give like negative feedback or less than stellar feedback about the tools that they have to use. And the types of things that they'll say is this, I'm not going to name any particular tools, but this tool is a chore to use. This one here takes 3 times longer than we would if we didn't have to use it. And we do it because, project is mandated it, or the company has been using it for 10 years. And oftentimes I think the software will solve the business need as a business. But the end user experience and the people that actually have to input information and use it on a day-to-day basis, for them, the software is they're kind of like the input rather than the customer, I think, a lot of times for construction software. And without going on like a giant rant, and asking myself questions, but the next question, I guess, is why is that, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with the relationship between construction software providers and contractors. If you think about the construction business, oftentimes on large, especially infrastructure project, which is my background, we're talking about huge sums of money. Oftentimes relative to other industries, low margins. And, for a construction contractor, there's a lot of things that can go wrong and only very few things that can go right. And the idea of, letting projects try 3 different tools that might do the same thing and then getting feedback and using that to make a decision about what the business uses sounds like a lot of risk and distraction from, what they should be doing and what they need to be doing to deliver projects. And that, I think, causes construction contractors to worry about like fragmented tools and procure software kind of like we would procure anything else in construction, like whether it be a subcontractor or a reinforcing steel contract. Write a scope of work, put a team together to evaluate 3 or 4 different tools, possibly run a proof of concept, but really with the one that's already been chosen, and then deploy that way. And that, I guess, builds or sets a set of incentives for construction software providers, because as a construction software provider, you're incentivized to have core competencies in sales and building tools that provide value for the decision maker and that evaluation team. You're not incentivized to build tools that end users love as much as you are those other factors. And yeah, as a result, it's kind of a secondary thing.
Yeah, that's actually pretty true. I mean, even if you take most of the consultants in this world as well, project consultants, right? They're incentivized for profit as well, not to really improve the client's project. And that's an interesting take on it too. And
I usually, sorry to interrupt you,
no,
Dale, but I use the analogy like it's kind of like studying to the test, right? Or like if you think about the emission standard debacle with Volkswagen, the cars perform really well in the specific set of circumstances or the
yes.
tests, but when they're actually on the road, not as much.
No, absolutely. So yeah, is it designed for testing, or is it designed for actual deployment? Yeah,
exactly.
No, this is true. And if we break it down a bit, because obviously there's lots of different types of software in construction. Yep. You'll have everything from your scheduling, your doc control, your visualization and reporting software, your risk management software, 3D modeling, dare we say it, 4D, 5D, etc. I just wonder, maybe it does all suck because it doesn't all play nicely together. Individually, it might be brilliant pieces of information. I don't know. And I'm not a software geek at all. I'll tell you that up front. But this is me trying to poke the bear a little bit and say, actually, how do we play nicely together?
Yeah, it like if you look at it from a construction contractor's perspective, the problem that a lot of they face is they've gone from, as they adopt software, they've gone from having 50 or 100 spreadsheets that manage something to 20 tools or SaaS tools that are also still siloed. So you know, connecting them becomes an effort. And not to, like, I guess, self-confirm my theory, but I think a lot of it comes back to the approach to trialing and deploying and purchasing software, because I guess contractors can sometimes be a bit afraid to let teams run and trial and do different things and make autonomous decisions about what they use. What happens from a construction software vendor's perspective is that there are fewer and fewer potential customers and deals, and the deals get bigger and bigger. And those bigger deals push construction software vendors to do customization on the deployment, which means that they build custom APIs and build connections on those bigger, like, enterprise deals. If you look at software in other industries where this concept of, like, bottom-up SaaS or building software and giving it away for free to an end user that will get benefit from it, when you've got that model, the software vendors are incentivized, because the potential customers are smaller and more of them, to build out-of-the-box integrations that are easy to set up. You know, 2 clicks to set up an integration between one marketing tool and another marketing tool. I think the incentives and with the right incentives, construction software, the onus should be on the software providers to build out-of-the-box integrations with each other. And there are cool software companies and API and integration companies that are focusing on doing that specifically. But I think with the right incentives, there are the ability and the know-how is there. It's a case of focus and incentives.
No, absolutely. And you got me thinking there as well. Why do we use software ultimately? Because we've been building, as we've had many discussions, we've been building projects for centuries, you know. The Egyptians, they never had software, or maybe they did, it was aliens. Who knows? But the point being is we have no evidence they used any software, right? We don't have real evidence there were aliens that helped them. But surely in this modern day and age, we've got this technology, we've got software in this technology. It should be helping us, in my mind at least, churn information faster, for one, pull information together quicker as well, 2, and then 3, turn that that data into meaningful information we can easily digest and make decisions out of. And yet, although we have all this technology around, we still have some problems in that. And maybe that's where the human aspect is, because maybe it's a bit of, well, you know, the whole garbage in, gospel out, right? You have the perfect system, but actually what's going in. So do we then have an issue where there's a user problem, where we haven't trained people enough to understand what software should be doing for them?
Like you said before, there are lots of different types of systems. And I think the answer to that question does vary a little bit between systems. So you've got tools that are built for maybe a small set of professional experts at that tool that the business needs or a project needs. That software, the way that you onboard or train a user for that type of software would be substantially different to, say, if you were building, just to pick an example, an application that was a site diary to collect records from what was happening on site every day. Your end user in that case is potentially a less technically sophisticated person. And so I guess my background and where my thought goes to is the latter group. They're usually the harder ones to get a good, strong deployment on a project and good buy-in to. And I think, again, it goes back to this incentive thing, because software is procured top down. Usually what happens on a project is a mandate, we're using this for this, or we're using that for that. And, you know, if the model was that software was deployed, you know, engineer could think, I've got a problem, I need a thing to solve site diaries. I could go to the market and find 1 or 2 tools. They could give me an option to use the software for free. By the way, like if you pick 10 software providers and went to their website and clicked on their pricing page, I'd be surprised if you got more than 1 or 2 that showed you a number. You know, like the pricing's obscured.
Yeah,
it's hard to know. You know, it just
Inquire
makes
now.
it. Yeah, exactly. And have 5 meetings, and then we're going to email you 50 times. You know, so I think if the incentives were there, where projects could more freely and individuals could more freely use, deploy, test software within a business, then software providers have got to respond to that. And alongside that becomes onboarding built into that software that gets people from the front door to getting the value out of the software quicker, without a company-wide training program and without you know, refresher training. And this is something that is like, you know, for people that are not in construction, it's like what software does. But it's if you only use construction software, it's very much the opposite. It's like technical software that comes with the training package and services and workflows that have to be enforced.
Yeah, it would be great if there was sort of a menu almost, and you went, okay, this is the type of project we've got, all the various, you know, the various aspects of it, the characteristics. It went in, they went, okay, this is the software you should be using. Or here's your options. And then it's almost like, you know, Amazon, where you have a product list and you got all the reviews from different people and you see which one's closest to 5 stars. Can we get there where you've got sort of, here's all the products?
I'm just going to message Val. Dale and I are starting a new business.
Don't tell him. Don't tell him. We haven't hit record yet.
Look, I think the software that will exist on construction projects in 5 or 10 years hasn't been, like, a lot of it hasn't been invented yet. And so having this menu is kind of I was at a number of months ago, I was at the Future of Construction event in Sydney. And one of the things that struck me was listening to CEOs of different contractors talking. And 1 or 2 of them had expressed thoughts of, like, it would be great if there was just one software package that we needed to buy for the whole business. You know, it was that someone just told us, here's the software that you need for the whole business. We don't want to you know, they don't want to think about it. It's a distraction from what they really need to do. And it's tough, because that's not you know, when you've got a space innovating as quickly as it is now, that it doesn't work like, you know, it doesn't work like that. You try to make a menu of the tools, it's outdated within 2 months, 3 months. So that's why I think, like, you know, if projects and individuals were able, I think I've said this several thousand times now, I should probably stop, but yeah, if individuals were able to, it's kind of like crowdsourcing feedback within a business of what tools work and don't work. You know, it's distributing that decision-making or testing process and then contractors can just, I guess, step back for a period of time, maybe be a little bit comfortable with 5 tools doing the same thing across the business for a period, and eventually one should win organically. And then they can make a decision and integrate that with the business. And the benefit for them would be that you don't have the battle of, after you choose a tool for the next 5 years, trying to force it down the throats of teams that don't want to use it, you know?
Do companies, or is this where the partnership comes into play? Do companies or projects have the luxury of time and, I guess, the cost to be testing out projects, software on their projects? Because we've established, right, maybe the testing in-house isn't the right place. You know, your car testing, the Volkswagen scenario, but then you take it to the road, you know, the real life where it should be used. But projects don't have that luxury, I don't think, or do they?
Yes and no. Like, there's times on a project where you don't want, you know, if it's coming to like peak delivery of a project, or there's definitely certain times in a project where you do not want to be changing the way that the project operates. But there are also times when you're setting up a project, like, I don't know, if you just take planning as a function, you go to a new project, most planning managers will sit down and write a planning procedure of how they're going to do planning on the project. And at that time, they're thinking about process and tools. And it's a perfect time to try a different piece of software that they might have seen 6 months ago or something. And again, if that was something that they did, the incentive then for construction software providers that person might use or test is make it super easy for that person to onboard, and make it super easy for them to set up their project, and make it super easier for them to understand and get to the value quicker. So yeah, I think to answer your question, I think there are times when you just can't change the way that the project operates, and there are times that you can think about how it works, and it might be at the start, it might be before things really ramp up, or it might be at the end when peak delivery is sort of past and you're thinking about, well, we might trial something that we'll use on the next project.
And what are your thoughts on, if those listening go, okay, that's great advice, Jason, but what are the signs we can look out for to go, this is the right time to be testing, whether it's the start, the middle, or the end? Is there a scenario where you go, okay, actually, you know what? That's probably the right environment to be testing in on a project. Is that something you've done with your clients before?
I think the time that I guess we see people reach out to us is I guess one of 3 points during a project. One is like at the start where they're trying to define how they're going to do something. The other is, like I said, at the end when they're thinking about, okay, well, this didn't work very well on this project. What would we do on the next one? But then throughout the project, there seems to come points where the way that things are operating are just not working for everyone. And, people are complaining about how they do X or complaining about how they do Y, when there's a sort of team consensus that something's not working. And it's kind of at that point, you've got a bit of momentum to say, well, okay, if you don't like how you do X, why don't you try this for a month,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's project dependent and scenario dependent. And I'm sure there's people that say like, yeah, but that's when we, I guess, not to talk shop, but that's when we see people definitely reaching out and having success making changes.
No, it's a good point of reference, because people will come to you when they think they're ready as well.
Yeah.
So as you say, it is reliant on those that actually are closest to the project too. Often, if you come in with a fresh set of eyes, you might not have the full scale of where that project is. The other one that popped into mind while you were talking there was, I think of a lot of software products, and I think in many cases you kind of need a experienced user to be able to use that product particularly well. And I always try, and let's take Primavera, for example. Everyone knows Primavera, right? It's global, it's clunky, there's all things wrong with it. We know that, but
it's awesome for the people that use it.
Well, you say that, but I don't know, because if you're a true project planner, right? I don't believe you should be holding all of the scheduling information, because let's face it, it's only scheduling information these days that planners hold. They don't hold everything, right? And I keep telling them this. I'm like, a planner wasn't a planner 10, 20 years ago that, as it is today, because you're just scheduling, you just bring logic together in activities. They considered cost and risk and the commercial aspects and resources and everything. And some planners out there listening to this will probably go, Dale, I do that. Stop, fuck off. Anyway, sorry, guys.
But they don't, sorry to interrupt, but even on construction projects, and like now I'm really delving into the area that we work in, but they don't hold all the schedule information.
Yeah.
Like they hold schedule information to a level, and then you might have a project engineer here that's got a 4-week look ahead spreadsheet, or you've got a site engineer that's got a whiteboard with a schedule on it. And if you ask yourself which one dictates, does the planner's schedule or the site engineer's schedule determine what happens on site tomorrow? My money's on the site engineer.
No, absolutely.
Sorry, I interrupted your question.
No, it's interrupt away. And it comes back to this whole notion of trying to have a single source of truth. Can we have a single source of truth? Is probably another avenue we could go down, but let's not go there yet. My question was actually going to be around how we can get away from sort of one plane, one pilot, sort of how we can have software that's accessible to everyone, that's perhaps even autonomous, right? You don't need a driver. Someone that the software is there, anyone can come from any angle and get anything out of it. Will we ever get there? And perhaps this is a nod to Val, because he'll probably would have asked you if he was here, what does the future of software look like? So maybe that's where we're headed with this question. Will we get there?
I think my frame of reference is other industries and outside of construction. And this is completely subjective based on what I've observed from using tools, but the trend will seem to go that there will be a proliferation of tools that do specific things along like a value chain. And then those tools will be forced to integrate with each other as customers, demand that, I don't know, my 4-week look ahead talks to my site diary, or, my P6 schedule talks to my 4-week look ahead. And then as those integrations become, as they exist, you start to define like what looks like a, take planning, like a planning stack. And then over time, I think what happens is those start to be consumed by the bigger company. They might purchase the vertically down that chain. So it kind of, I think, like gets distributed with a bunch of disconnect or interconnected tools. And then maybe some of those start to aggregate again, as like an Innate or a Procore or something start going up. That would be a good addition to our platform, et cetera, et cetera. If I think about the tools that we use in our software business, we've definitely seen that we've gone from having a lot of different tools that talk to each other fine to more and more than that just getting aggregated and you've got 1, 2, 3 vendors.
And then even though it's all sort of coming together, how about the usability and access of it all? Because if you're tackling it from different aspects, do you have to be trained in all of these different aspects? You see what I mean? The back to the people element, the user side of things. So will the planner or the scheduler have to have the same skill set necessarily as, the site engineer that's pulling data out of the same thing? Because I think where we're going with this is those two don't have to talk anymore. And perhaps there isn't a planner in the future when software takes it over. The software, the Alexas and the Googles of the world will go, hey, what do you want to start with? Okay, how long is that? Okay, what happens next? And then it draws a schedule for you. And then update cycle. Oh, what did you do? So I don't know. I'm just playing around with this. Where do you think it'll go?
I'm going to dodge the artificial intelligence question because there are definitely people that you've had on and that exist that are much more qualified than me to answer. But I will, when it comes to the question of, the skill set of, say, a site engineer or a planner, or whether they need to have the same skill set to use this one system. I think the way to visualize it is that the system is like a system of connected applications.
Right.
And we kind of already do it on projects, even if we're using spreadsheets and P6, I keep going back to the planning as the example, but you'll have a master schedule in P6. You might have a 4-week look ahead in an Excel spreadsheet, but then you might also have engineers marking up on a PowerPoint slide the map saying, this is what's happening this week, this is what's happening next week. Or they might make like weekly work plans for supervisors. And so what's really happening in quite a manual way there is we're breaking this master schedule up into different views and tools, and actually like little Excel spreadsheet apps that, whether it be a site engineer or supervisor, are using to consume the information from the plan. And so I think that's the way it develops. The tools are these apps become connected to each other. I've got data in P6 that knows about the data in the 4-week look ahead. The 4-week look ahead knows about P6. That pushes stuff out to a sequence map, and then that pushes stuff out to a weekly work plan or a daily work plan for a supervisor, just without the manual back and forth and spreadsheet manipulation.
Yeah, and we can do that today, right? It's not something that's in the future, or it's creating that that desire to have it, I think. And you'll probably know better than me that changing behaviors on site is really, really difficult. And so just again, back to the adoption or adaption to using software. How big of a challenge is that when it comes to uptake of software?
Yeah, again, I'm trying to avoid going back to my initial point. I think because the onus is really should be on the software provider to solve a large part of that problem. If you've got a tool that going back to the headline sucks for an end user, yeah, it's hard because you're having to force people to do something they inherently don't want to do, or is worse for them. I remember an example of a team that showed me a cost forecasting tool that they would use. And the way that the engineers would need to each month upload or get their forecasts submitted was that they would build in a spreadsheet, all their forecasts for different cost codes, and then have to upload them individually to the tool. And that works fine if you format the spreadsheet properly. But if you have a date cell formatted incorrectly or a string cell formatted as a number, all sorts of things like that, the system would simply just say, error, try again. And so you go through every cost code and work out what cells formatted incorrectly. And so an engineer, might spend a couple hours or a day or whatever updating their forecast. And then on a Friday afternoon might spend an hour to 2 hours playing, spreadsheet tennis with a piece of software as you try to get it uploaded. If you're trying to deploy that software on a project, you're going to have a hell of a time with engineers telling you that it sucks. And so that's where I say that the software vendor's got to provide a tool that the end user can save time or get some benefit out of. It's kind of like a related topic, but I've always had this view that a lot of the workflows in construction, unlike other industries, because construction's kind of a little bit fragmented if you look vertically. You've got designers, clients, contractors, subcontractors. It's quite fragmented. So many of the things that software does in construction, not always, but a lot of it, is one of those people doing work for the benefit of another one. So a contractor might have to submit QA records in a specific system for the benefit of the client having it, or a designer might have to use a specific system for the benefit of the contractor. And in that case, if you have software that hasn't got a good end user experience, it's even harder to deploy because you're now it's now outside of your team. And the normal construction solution is we write it into a contract and stuff like that, and then they're just forced to do it. And so
where do you if I jump in there, where do you sit with that? Do you think that the entire supply chain should be using the same tool sets so that there's this alignment, or do you think that it depends on what they're delivering? Where do you sit?
I think that let's say a contractor or a designer should be able to choose a set of tools that they want to operate that best suit the way they want to operate their business, and become part of how they deliver projects and become part of their competitive advantage. And that those tools should have a common language to talk to the other tools, and that the integration of those systems should be, at the moment, if I go back to our business and I want to implement a new tool in our marketing stack in our marketing stack, I could probably sign up for a free trial, integrate it in 2 or 3 clicks, and then we're off and running. And that just doesn't usually exist in construction between tools. So I think a contractor, the place to be with a contractor, doesn't have to change tools when it goes from customer to customer. Those tools should, there's a long way to go from where we are now to that.
How big is that chasm, that common language gap?
It's very hard to answer because it depends on are we talking about design or BIM or schedule information, or so in some areas it's a lot closer. There's a lot of effort in common language in BIM. Again, I'm not the expert. I don't want to go swinging for stuff that's outside of my range, but in some areas it's much bigger than others.
Don't worry, Val and I always go swing outside of our range. So yeah, We're the village idiots on this podcast. You won't beat us at that. Look, that's fantastic. I wanna you mentioned that you did bring one or two anecdotes back with that cost process as an example. Do you have any real life examples of where software doesn't suck and it has really improved the project outcome, and it's tangible that software played the key role in changing that outcome?
Was that one of the curly questions you were going to ask me, Dale?
Well,
because
it's usually reserved for
don't wanna
Machine Gun
answer-
Martin, but he's not here.
Because my instinct is, yeah, so I won't, excluding our product, right? Excluding our product. There are definitely examples of some of the best and worst examples are in the same space that I can think of. Site diaries is an area that first comes to mind. And so I've seen examples where a contractor or a team will say that compared to an Excel spreadsheet that they were using before, the current process now takes 3 times as long for an end user to submit. But I've also seen examples where, you know, it's just as easy to submit. And then on the business side, you no longer have to do this. They used to do a manual data entry of rewriting all the stuff that was in Excel spreadsheets into one big register and, you know, compiling that for cost profiling or, you know, working out what actual cost was or building a, you know, hate to mention it, like a delay claim. So there's definitely an aggregation of data benefit on most systems if the end user experience is not worse or adds some benefit. There's almost always an aggregation of data benefit and an admin benefit. And I had another thought, but it's not fully formed, so I'll stop there, Dal.
I never have fully formed thoughts. Don't worry.
What do I say? We're 6:30 in the morning, so
exactly. There was another bit of tech I saw a while ago, and I can't remember the company or organization, where they put cameras on. You'll probably know them. Put cameras on the hard hats.
Yep.
And they kind of go around. You know, they record everything during the day, and using AI or whatever the case may be, they kind of can tell what's happened during that day, aka sort of a video site diary, if you will. I just wondered how accurate that is. Also in Europe, as you're probably aware, there's GDPR and things like that. So I just wonder your thoughts on using that type of tech. Then do you bring sound into it so you can hear what they were discussing? Are there any risks that they were talking, you know, what were the opportunities they missed out on? It's like bringing sort of, you know, the decision makers on site. Is there ethics involved in that as well? I'm not sure. I don't know.
The not fully formed thought related to what you said,
right.
From a survey perspective or tracking of actuals, like I think the leverage or benefit from a lot of these platforms that either make or provide software for drone mapping of sites and measuring say earthworks volumes and how much has actually been moved, like the amount of time saved from those systems would be epic, I would imagine. I've seen I can think of 3 different companies that do the type of hard hat camera. There's other ones that are trying to do the robot that walks around and does a same thing. I would imagine that they do a good job of. I've seen demos of 2 of them. And I imagine they do a good job of keeping good image records of progress that would be really valuable if you were trying to step back in time and knew what happened on a site. The holy grail is to try and work out what actually happened in a data perspective of like on that site, you know, instead of just having the image of the pipe being installed, to be able to recognize that the pipe was installed. And a number of them are doing that. And I don't want to hazard a guess of how advanced it is. I've not seen it being used on any projects successfully in that way. But interestingly, I'm aware of 2 like grant funded projects in the UK that are trying to solve this type of problem. Some with cameras, some with other sensors, but it's still it's very early. I don't think it's something that a contractor is going to see or use for a number of years. But then the goal would be to have that update schedule progress and then feed that back, connect those dots, because we've got a plan, we've got a more detailed plan, and then we've got the actual, and we want to aggregate that story together without having 5 different systems of record.
No, absolutely. And Val will give me stick if I don't ask you your thoughts around VR and AR coming into projects and how that might actually improve or maybe not improve the way we deliver construction projects.
I have been, if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have been in the heavy skeptic category.
Yeah.
But I've seen some applications recently which look really cool in the way that they can, you could walk on a construction site and you could see this, this is what it will look like in 2 months. This will look like in 6 months. Really cool. And I can imagine situations where it's really valuable to help, you've got a subcontractor turning up on site that, their first day on site, they're going to install steelwork for them to be able to visualize what's going to be there and getting them orientated with how the site's going to evolve. Super valuable. Adoption of that software is, or that, because there's hardware involved and
cost.
That is cost. That is tricky. So I don't know timeline, how long that might take, but the applications are certainly cool. But the question becomes, I think, in my mind, if I'm sort of doing stream of consciousness, is, does it become a tool that there's like 1 or 2 of these things on a site? Or is it something that everyone, does everyone's hard hat have the functionality, or are there like 2 of these things that are kind of like a novelty that we'll use when someone's turning up on site, I don't know.
Yeah, it's great to ponder though. And this is why we have the podcast, is just to share ideas. I don't think, and many times, we have a lot of experienced guests and they do have answers, but a lot of times they don't as well, because that is the thing about this is we bring on thought leaders like yourself just to go, what is there? What is the art of the possible? And as you say, perhaps the timeline, you can't answer that. But what you are, for me, quite certain about is it will play a part, which is interesting within itself.
I think so. Yeah. I think the value is, I think the value is there. What is an interesting question related to it is like whether AR, VR will become more widely adopted or mainstream in like in consumer products, or in this use case first, do we use it on site after everyone's walking around with the, the cool glasses or whatever? Or is it the other way around? Does an industry, because I know like the military, for example, I've seen a lot of documentaries where the military are like quite advanced in that area, but construction has a very strong use case. So does it happen before it's widely adopted in consumer products? I don't know. I think probably, actually, because I've avoided answering a number of questions. I think if I was to have to staple something to the mask, I think it would be definitely before we're walking around with VR goggles on.
Well, we'll ask you in a year again,
goggles,
because as you said, a year ago your answer would have been very different to what it is today. So we'll get you back in a year, or maybe sooner than that, and we'll see. Or maybe in 10 years, depending on the timeline, right? Well, I don't know if you've heard, we're actually testing out doing a podcast in the metaverse. So we've got the kit, and we're testing it out, and we might be doing an episode from there.
I might be showing my age then, Dale. You'll have to explain to me what it is.
The metaverse, I don't even know what it is. All I know is I put on these VR goggles, you connect to an app where you feel like you're in the same room. It's pretty cool because when your head moves around, nothing else does. It feels like, the walls are keeping still and the floors, underneath you. And yeah, it does honestly feel like you're next to someone when you're in the space. Not someone physically and in real life, but it feels like, most of us played video games growing up, right? It feels like, or computer games. It feels like you're actually in that computer game, because you look around you. So
Yep.
that's pretty cool. The thing is, though, we did have Dr. Tammy Watchorn on a couple of episodes ago, and she was saying that actually the reason why VR isn't, in her opinion, viable is because not everyone can use it. It excludes a lot of people. Quite a number of people get vertigo. They, you know, one of the apps I used, your brain thinks you're moving, but because your body isn't, it actually gives you a bit of a headache and that, so it disorientates. So yeah, I mean, if you haven't checked it out, just go and check it out.
I remember a number of years ago, I went to one of those, you know, you go to the big facility and you wear it and you go around and shoot aliens or whatever it was. And we probably went at about 10 o'clock in the morning. And for the rest of the day, I had this like splitting migraine, just pounding. So yeah, I think I might be in that category.
Yeah. So and Dr. Tammy said actually it's actually a larger group than you realize. You'd think, oh, VR headset, you know, put on the goggles, hold the controllers, and off you go. But she said it's actually a very large group. So yeah, maybe that's.
I wonder what it does to people's to people's eyesight generally, because like the focal length. Yeah, it's one of the areas that I'm sure people are studying.
Well, then we have a nod to Dr. Eddie Obeng, who said on the podcast, you know, every solution creates a problem or something to that effect. Today's problems are yesterday's solutions. So we've got to be careful a little bit as well with what we introduce. I think you're right. But yeah, look, let's stick with the future. I'm not going to ask you anything specific on it. Where do you think generally the future of software is? And you can be as specific or as vague as you want to be, because as we say, software is a big topic in our space. And there's probably different maturity levels depending on the various aspects you're looking at, whether it's cost, scheduling, risk, 3D modeling, whatever the case may be, reporting, etc. But generally, for me, an open question: where are we headed with software in projects, construction projects specifically?
I think there's some concepts in how software and professionals interact, and there's this idea of the relationship between them, where it's like sometimes it might be a software that runs on autopilot that automatically does certain things, and in some cases where it's like a co-pilot. So it helps a professional do a job. And I see lots of space for tools and solutions and software to grow into this co-pilot space that in other industries is pretty prolific. So to use an example, there's a tool from a company, GitHub, which helps developers. It sort of can take the first 3-4 lines of code that you've written and suggest the remaining block of code that you might write, based on the data collected from previous. And so the impact that can have on the speed of and the quality of code developers write. And so I think that there's a lot of that. If someone's trying to plan a sequence of work, being able to, in the moment of planning, tell them what the collective knowledge of other people and other projects have experienced, and be able to digest those factors and give suggestions. I think we're a long time. Well, the people in the machine learning AI building a schedule, they'll probably say that we're not. They'll probably say that you can generate a schedule from scratch. But I know in conversations I've had with Santosh and a number of other people that maybe I'm just closed-minded that it can capture all of the like site logistics on the day constraints that exist on a project. You know, a construction project isn't like a factory, as much as some people try to treat it like it. You know, it's the factory where the ground underneath you is moving every day, and people are coming on and disappear. Like it's much more dynamic. And so I think that this co-pilot relationship, where software is starting to be able to aggregate the collective knowledge of data and suggest things to people as they're doing their job, and get them through the like 5 tasks or 10 tasks that they need to do more accurately and efficiently. That's, I guess, the strongest vision I have.
No, that's very, very interesting. And we've had a number of guests talk about software, as you're aware, and also the flip side to say that actually, software is great, but there's also the human side. And if I add to that, I think it's, as you say, I like the way you use Copilot, because that suggests it's not completely getting rid of the human aspect, right?
No,
It's
I can't
actually,
see getting, yeah.
yeah, it's complementing. In some cases, I've actually started saying, you know what? In some cases, we are supplementing as well, because these low value transactional tasks that people used to do before, we don't have to do anymore. But it creates other tasks and other jobs, and new roles. And I don't think it's necessarily a dichotomy, people slash or software. It's how do we make it work together? And that's probably the biggest challenge. And as you say, the pace at which software is developing today and advancing, can people truly keep up while still delivering these highly complex projects, which, let's face it, are becoming more and more complex? So it's almost a chicken and egg, because projects are getting more complex, we need technology to help us. But because which is advancing faster, software development or complex projects? I don't know.
Well, the productivity curve that everyone talks about in construction, that every conference gets opened with, that research from McKinsey, I think gives the answer, right? The project complexity has been historically outstripping the advancement in productivity and technology and construction for decades. And I think you're right. Like, there's going to be a set of tasks that currently, the person that when I was starting out as a site engineer, the administrators on a project that used to copy stuff from site diaries and put them into spreadsheets and copy those spreadsheets into reports, that task should just be automated. There's, and a lot of it is now, to be honest, a lot of that type of very, very mundane data entry and copy and paste stuff. There's no need for a human to spend the time doing that, but there is a lot of knowledge and skill and human understanding in the professionals in construction. And that's why I see this Copilot arrangement being more prolific in the sort of short to medium term, because I don't know, again, I might just be ignorant, but I don't know how you fully capture all that in machine learned outcome.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And maybe my brain's just too small to compute it all.
Yeah, it's just
maybe I need
two
software.
idiots being that can't two idiots that can't work out what.
Well, I'm usually with another Australian, so if you want to take his place, feel free. I don't think you can stoop to his lows, though. So, yeah, give it your best shot. I don't think you can. Val, we love you. Look, Jason, we can't let you go without giving you Fiverr, which is our pop quiz. So if you're ready, I'm gonna take you through your paces.
Yeah, I've not prepped for this at all. So we're gonna do your 5 easiest ones, are we, Dale?
I have no idea. They just random. We've got a randomizer. That's a lie. We usually have Martin, who's our randomizer. So I'm just going to pick one of his old ones and let's go for it.
Rotate the board, righto.
Exactly. Right. The first one's quite a common one. Steak, seafood, or salad?
Steak.
Number 2. What is the key to being a great disruptor?
I think constantly listening to and seeking negative feedback.
Nice. 3. What does a good role model look like?
Oh, wow. If I knew the answer to that, I would be one, I think. This is tough. I think it's someone, from a person perspective, it's someone that is not only technically outstanding, but it's someone of high integrity, and someone that will take the time to teach and wants to pass on knowledge to people. There's lots of people that are technically brilliant that don't have the mindset to pass on knowledge. I don't know if that's the question you're asking, but that's the answer I'm giving.
It's your answer. Whatever you say is correct.
Okay, thanks.
Question 4. If you could go back to one moment in your life, what would it be and why?
Oh, these are meta questions, Dale. This is. I think if I could go back to when I was at university and school, I might have told myself I could relax a little bit more. I was extremely competitive, especially at school. I remember nights of, wouldn't sleep before an exam. You get sucked into the bubble of competition. And I think I'd go back to that time and tell myself I could just chill out a little bit more.
Australians being competitive? Never.
Yeah.
Nice
And
one.
the other thing I'd go back to is I'd go back to 2006 in a football match where I tried to run into the biggest guy on the field and tore my meniscus. I'd probably avoid running into him because my knee would be in a much better state right now if I hadn't have done that.
Oh, great advice for anyone listening. Right, number 5. Which superpower would you choose to have for a day and why?
I want to say unlimited wishes because that's like that's the ultimate superpower, right? Yeah, I'm going to go with unlimited wishes.
Nice, nice. When you find that genie, let me know. It'll be
Yeah,
amazing to
something
meet
to
him
do
or
with
her.
Tim Tams.
Something to do with Tim Tams. You have so many flavors of Tim Tams these days. The last time I was in Australia, they
I'm
were
going to let you
limited.
into a secret. I don't know that the Australians are that excited about Tim Tams.
No, they're not, but everyone else is.
Yeah. I remember I was living in London in 2015 and a friend of ours got a care package from home and in the package was a packet of Tim Tams and a few other things. And I think those Tim Tams got thrown out. I don't want their mother or father to find that out, but yeah.
So we won't name them.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Look, Jason, it's been amazing to kick the tires with you for, about an hour or so. And we definitely have to get you back. There's so much I feel like we haven't covered yet. So, we'll get you back in less than a year, hopefully, to see how we've advanced in this space. But before we let you go, are there any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I guess the only thought is to if you're in, I think the way to change the construction software sucking conundrum is if projects are willing to experiment, try, and put software to the test, construction software providers will be incentivized to make stuff that actually works and delivers value for end users. And I'd encourage both software providers and contractors to work in that direction.
Fantastic. Look, like I say, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed spending time with you, Jason.
Been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
And we wish you well going forward. So, folks, there you are. That's all the time we have for this episode. But remember, before you go, please do help us pay it forward by sharing a link to this episode on your favorite social media. A massive thank you once again to our guest, Jason Lancini. And thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. From me and no one else, it's bye for now.